Hi everyone. So thank you for joining the session Mastering the Art of Beauty Communications. I'm going to dive straight in. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jane Walsh. I'm the CEO of Scene Group, which is a global communications agency with offices both in the UK and the US. So what we are going to go through today is a little bit about us as an agency, so that you know that I've got the credibility to talk about consumer beauty communications. Then I'm going to take you through the 5 C's, which I always feel are really important to setting up any really strong brand strategy, communication strategy, talking about beauty as a whole, which is so nuanced, and I think that's something that's really important when it's specific to beauty communications. Then I'm going to talk about innovation and storytelling, be considered and hyper aware, especially in today's society and that kind of conversion. And then consistency is compelling, which took me quite a time to understand. However, I get it now, and I think it'll be a good thing to share. So we're Scene Group, and ultimately we are built as an industry-leading collective of beauty experts. So we only work within beauty. We work in one vertical, and our team is made up in various different ways to encompass strategy, creative communications, and beyond. And I think the kind of three or four things that we really set ourselves out on is deep knowledge of the beauty environment, being courageous, so doing things that have not been done before, and brilliant ideas. You know, now it's one of the things that we talk about. Innovation is at a level which is so strong that actually your idea is as important as the product itself. So we're structured in 3 ways. So we've got Beauty Scene, which is the kind of beauty communications arm. So from any way that we are communing and connecting the brand with the consumer. We've got Scene Works, which is all of our kind of brand development, brand strategy, analytics and content. And then we've got Community, which is a proprietary network that we use in various different ways. So Beauty Scene is really about connecting brands with consumers via this kind of expert understanding of the who and the how. So who do we want to talk to, and how do we want them to talk about the brand that we're working for? Then you've got Scene Works, so specialist thought leaders. So we've got global strategy and analytics team, we've got copywriting and trend forecasting and creative officers, and then we've got design and production. And similarly to that, strategy and analytics is such a fundamental part of our business. And I think it was the one thing that really made our business full service discipline 5 years ago when we set up the Scene Works division. It was the first time that anyone had really delivered strategic insight specific to beauty outside of the comms teams, creative and design, content and brand experience. And I think we talk a lot about being experts in beauty because it's so nuanced. It was the premise for the agency in the beginning. And then Community, so a kind of like-minded collective of beauty change makers, and we are so excited by the community that we work with. So as an agency, we've got 20 odd thousand followers, and all of these people are just desperately interested in beauty, what's happening, what the brand's doing, what are the team doing. So we use these people now to run a whole series of different things with us. So they inform us with market research. We do talent collaborations via them. So we found our brilliant Alicia Lati, who is an amazing skinfluencer who we now roster. We do content creation with them. So we just recently did a really brilliant affiliate marketing campaign, and then micro influencer campaign. So it's really looking at the really nuanced points of view that all of these guys have, and how we can support our brands with them. We operate in London and New York. So our London business is 14 years old now, and our New York business is 5 years old. So infinitely smaller, but still exactly the same premise, and Scene Works supports them both globally. And then when we talk about being beauty specialists, this is our portfolio of clients, our current clients. And then we've also got a very similar offering in the US. And the one important thing to note is that we work mass to niche. So, we understand the reason why a woman buys into, the £1.50 Radox, but equally why she also might buy into that kind of £300 Amorovitska face cream. So really being able to map the consumers that navigate all of the different categories and all of the different purchasing behaviours is super important. So that's a bit about the agency. So I definitely do know about beauty, so I think that's handy for this session, considering we're trying to talk about mastering the art of beauty comms. But there's kind of, as I mentioned, 5 really important C's that we always start when we take on a new brand and a client. You know, we obviously match them against our own values. Is it going to be a great partnership for us, and vice versa for them? Can we do what they want to and have those honest conversations? But then as a step 1, the 5 C's are really important to everything that we do. So ultimately, they are, you know, insight territories, which allow you to get completely immersed in the brand. And it's not only important to happen from a kind of strategic point of view, so that you can come up with a campaign idea or a brand strategy that's really compelling, but equally it's really important so that when you download what this brand is for and who it's for, and when you're pitching it and when you're teaching, you know, the team, they understand truly. And the five insights that we always make sure we've done the kind of due diligence of understanding and serving is consumer. So, you know, what do we know about the people that we're trying to appeal to? You know, how do they think and feel? Is this a brand for a Gen Z, and therefore she thinks and feels, or he thinks and feels this way? Or is this brand actually for someone that purchases with purpose front and center of their consumer choice? Or is it actually someone that's actually quite intimidated and perhaps not completely savvy when it comes to all of the information out there? So always understanding what is that consumer profile, what do they love, and actually sometimes what don't they love, but really being able to understand what was going to inspire them so that you can put that into your communication and also understand where they are. So then you've got the company and the brand. So what, you know, often we get brands and they're like, this is who we are, this is what we stand for, but this is where we want to be. So really understanding what that brand has in its heritage, you know, what it's done in the past, what it wants to do in the future, and understand also that, you know, where are you on that journey, and are there any things that actually you could bring to the forefront that perhaps have not been talked about for a little while, but could actually really help them on their kind of journey to success. So understanding the brand infinitely is also, of course, super important, and where it wants to go. You know, understanding what a brand sees as success, so that as a communicator you can help communicate and get them the success, is really important. Category and market. So what's happening in the category itself. So aims to understand the reasons why shifts and changes are happening. So, you know, you saw an absolute explosion in skincare during COVID. Colour cosmetics, not so much, for obvious reasons. No one's going out, and other than some big lipstick energy for a Zoom call, you know, there wasn't a huge amount. However, what we're about to see is, again, completely rebalancing of that. So understanding what's happening in the category so that you can really be informed about that brand's point of view. Culture, massive, absolutely fundamental to the importance of your ideas. So what's happening in the world? What are those kind of societal and environmental forces that will enable you to communicate your message more effectively, or actually sometimes pull back from a message that perhaps you thought was the right one to communicate? And I think that is absolutely critical in today's society, and the way in which we've kind of experienced quite an intense period. What's happening culturally is so important to make sure that you understand that from a brand's lens. And then competitors, so what are they doing? And sometimes this is as much about discounting what you shouldn't do than actually understanding what you should do. You know, we always talk about not being an imitator, but definitely being an image maker. And I think that one of the things there is to really look at the competitors to understand your point of view, but not obviously mimic, because there'll be no cut through. So a little bit more, just in terms of showing how we look specifically to each of these different sectors. So consumer insights, beliefs, values, passions, you know, desires. What does that consumer want from a brand? You're trying to basically uncover something new and interesting and enlightening about your audience so that you can appeal to them with the product or the brand in the most effective way. You know, what are they feeling about your category that you're trying to communicate? What are their needs? You know, needs of someone that just wants the best red lipstick versus someone that actually really wants to understand forensically the retinol levels because they know what's right for their skin. Is a very, very different consumer need. And then obviously the behaviors. You know, some people are buying, you know, some consumers and some categories are functional. They just want a great product that works. It's all the time. You know, think about a deodorant. They just want a brilliant deodorant that works. Whereas sometimes it's much more around, you know, exploration and treat. So what are the behaviors of that consumer, and how can you understand them so that you can then put your product or brand in the right space. The next one. Oh, I forgot my builds. Sorry about that. I had fancy builds. Company. So again, we talk about the history. Where has the brand come from? Is there anything interesting that perhaps has not been talked about in a while, but actually could be brought to the fore? You know, beliefs. What does the brand think and feel? Products. What's interesting or distinctive about what they sell? You know, every brand that comes to us, of course, thinks they've got the best product ever, and often that they do. But it's really about understanding why they think that, and what is it about the kind of technology or the language that brands use to communicate their products. Initiatives. So what are they doing outside of product development? You know, especially as we look to the future, I think, you know, what are the kind of green growth factors that the brand has? Who are the people within the brand? So often you will look to utilize other people outside of your brand founder or the company to cement your product credibility. However, what's really interesting is when you've got an unsung spokesperson, and you know, when we work with Unilever, we often find brilliant R&D people and brilliant consumer insight people that actually can come to the fore and give us a really interesting point of view or take on something, and we can use them for influencer, consumer events, press events, etc. And then purpose and principles. You know, outside of just selling stuff, why is that brand there? And I think, you know, when you think about the history, one of the brands that we still work with and did a campaign a couple of years ago that still really resonates is Charles Revson on Revlon. He was, you know, a decisive figure, but he coined the phrase matching lips and tips, and we were able to take matching lips and tips and the philosophy of that and kind of transition it into a modern day world, which it still really felt contemporary. But, you know, people had kind of forgot about talking for him for a while, and actually what was really interesting is to look at some of those kind of really important phrases that he managed to coin that could be kind of relevant to the modern day consumer. Category conversation. So category insights were obviously about looking at the players within the category, but they're also looking at changing, you know, what's changing in the category on cultural factors and the shifting needs of the consumer. And I always think Selfridges do this really brilliantly. You know, if you think about retail, halls of consumption's a particularly challenging topic right now. But what they've managed to do is, you know, they dip their toe in the water first of all with this kind of shop in shop to understand where the consumer was interested. They were the first retailer to really turn green, for want of a better word. And what that then did was then had a bit of a ricochet across the rest of the retail category. So category insights are always looking at what are the things that might be interesting that maybe I could take a learning from, in the same way Ren did that brilliant and genius beach cleanup, and that really powered so much philanthropy work across lots of different brands in lots of different ways. And then also, you know, we work with the British Beauty Council, which is an incredible organisation, and they do these reports. One, the value of beauty, so the economic impact of the beauty sector, which of course is absolutely vast and important and has been particularly hurt during the pandemic. And then the courage to change, which was the kind of sustainable, how can we support and collaborate to leave a lighter footprint on the world. But ultimately really learning from all of these category conversations where you might be able to lean into or partner with other brands. Cultural, so I mentioned this before, it's the social and the societal forces that are influencing how your consumer is thinking, feeling and behaving and what they want. And I think culturally we're at a really important time, an exciting time, and they are really brilliant macro trends that allow you to then kind of work out where in all of those that you can fit or you can play. So really understanding and thinking and being curious about culturally what's going on. And if you think, you know, I always love Supreme as a fashion brand, that it has this kind of hype drop culture, and they have things that we've never really been able to translate yet into beauty. And I always think that there are cultural shifts that have happened in fashion that are yet to happen in beauty and vice versa. But I think it's really interesting to look at the cultural and societal forces that are at play to really enable you to bring your consumer on the journey with you. And then finally, competitor mapping. It kind of does what it says on the tin really, but I think it's really interesting and useful to look at more closely what your brand can really own, because you discount so much. So, you know, is it when your brand lines up on the shelf, it's got really distinctive packaging, or actually does it look quite similar, and therefore probably that's not the message to lean into? Is it the lexicon of your brand? So, you know, we work with Tatcha and they've got the most delicious product names. So, you know, dewy water cream, and, you know, who doesn't want that on their skin? Everybody does. So really understanding, is it the tone of voice? Is it the way that your brand looks and feels? Is it the fact that you're calling out only one ingredient in a sea of kind of 12-step regimes similar to The Ordinary? So I think really understanding and mapping, whilst it's not the most fun part, I think personally, it really is integral to being able to have a clear point of view, so that as a communicator, you can confidently go to market and say, this is the reason why this brand is super important. So in summary to all of that, to truly communicate your message effectively, you must forensically understand what type of conversation you want to have, why you want to have it, with who, and a clear and informed brand or product point of view. And I've included a couple of case studies because I thought they were good to kind of actually put into play what we've been talking about. And this is a really interesting brand called Youth to the People. And, you know, the founders, Greg and Joe, they took the brand over from their grandmother and they did this massive piece of work. Like, what do we want this brand to say and be, and how do we want it to live? And what they really did is they looked across the category and they wanted to challenge the category. It's definitely a disruptor brand, and, you know, they saw this kind of industry aged by anti-aging claims, and, you know, this underserved audience because they wasn't the hottest latest 20-something, and they bought this brand to the market called Youth to the People, which is an incredible brand. But their whole philosophy and premise is that we believe youth is a mindset. So if you think about what's happening culturally, if you think about the consumer that they've seen that's underserved, they're thinking about what's happening culturally, which is actually, we've got an aging demographic. People that were once deemed as aging are now super youthful and doing more things than they've ever done before. There wasn't a brand that was really talking to that market. So they mapped all of the 5 C's and came up with what is an absolutely epic concept and brand. So the nuance of beauty. So, you know, we started the agency because beauty was often seen as an extension of fashion or a lifestyle agency. And actually what you really understand is, if 1 minute you're trying to tap into the reason someone buys, you know, a bottle of Peroni, and then the next minute you're trying to work on, why would my dog want to eat Pedigree Charm? And then you're trying to tap into the reason a woman buys a lipstick. It's a really convoluted journey. So what we really wanted to understand is that beauty is so nuanced and it's much more emotional than any other category. So understanding that is super important. And I think, you know, today's consumer is broader than ever before. So you've got a wider audience to talk to, which is why understanding who you want to talk to is really important. And also you've got people that are being able to explore beauty in new ways. You know, when you used to go into Boots, however many years ago, you picked up your Nurofen and you might have picked up a quick face wash. But now you can go and see and explore Fenty, and you can explore all of these amazing brands. So not only is your consumer broader, starting younger, buying into beauty much longer, but equally the ways in which they're consuming beauty has also changed. And the most exciting thing, which I find particularly compelling right now, is that beauty is enabling us to unearth conversations that have never been unearthed before. Because people, you know, brands are totally changing the algorithm on the industry norms. They're this kind of upsurge in fresh thinking brands and fresh thinking points of view that work really hard for product and for storytelling. They are seemingly reframing a beauty environment that was once quite kind of elitist and privileged. And now what's amazing is this is resulting in these new tribes of beauty conversations that you're having. So whether that's sexual wellness that had a huge spike during COVID, whether that's menopausal beauty and not being kind of scared to talk about, you know, menopause. It's a thing, it happens to us, you know, and diversity. It's, you know, diversity, it was once about shade foundation, and now it's about total, how do we as an industry showcase and be inclusive? So, you know, what's interesting about it is that beauty is unearthing conversations that perhaps other categories can't. But what makes it hard for a communicator is you've got to be really sensitive to those conversations. And there are also people, men and women, are being entertained across multitude of platforms now. So back in the day, media, online, brilliant. Now it's like, okay, you've got YouTube to educate me. I've got TikTok to entertain me and to challenge me. I've got brand content that actually now, you know, brands are editors in their own right now and are bringing amazing communications to the fore. So in terms of which channel you use for which category, you know, you're not going to talk about a serious skincare on Twitch, but actually you might really be able to understand that this curated edit of X, it sits perfectly on Instagram. So understanding who and the channel is really where you see this kind of acceleration of a brilliant comm strategy. And also, people are listening to so many voices now. So it used to be your mum and a celebrity, or your nan sometimes. And now you've got amazing derms and experts. You've got amazing industry authorities. You've got micro influencers. You've still got the celebrities. You've still got word of mouth. You've got brands. But I think, you know, the people to tell your stories all tell a different facet of your story. So when we talk about, you know, when we tell the team, you know, who's the angle for why you go into them for that with that angle, it's because it's so nuanced and each person has got a particularly different way of narrating your story and also has got a different role to play. So if you need to cement your skincare credibility, a derm is often a really great way to do that, or if you don't have it within the brand. So really understanding what can you authentically own and have the credibility to talk about, and what voices could you potentially use to kind of cement your positioning slightly further. So in summary, beauty is nuanced and emotionally charged. Therefore, the way of communicating this category is more diverse comparatively than most others. A solid comms plan will take all of this into consideration and most commonly have a multi-layered comms approach, which utilises many channels, many voices and many topics to cement the credibility and reason to believe in the brand and the products. And this is an example of Milk. So Milk Makeup, I don't know how familiar you are with it. It's a US-based brand that we launched over here a couple of years ago now. And one of the absolutely critical things about Milk is, yes, it's a great product, absolutely no question. However, it's got this incredible DNA and it's got this kind of studio heritage background. And they've always done stuff that felt a little bit more purposeful and inspired than just great product. It was always for that kind of grassroots creative talent. That's their kind of heritage and background. So they were launching a new product, which was a mascara, and we really wanted to take that working harder from a community point of view forward. So when yes, of course, we launched the mascara and people tried it and people loved it. But one of the key things that we did was we launched it in collaboration with Pussy Palace, who advocate safe raving. And that was a really important part because they've always been champion kind of creative, immersive talent. And we felt like the partnership not only lent a really amazing DJ and crowd, but it also allowed us to really connect with a whole new audience that perhaps had not been kind of spoken to by a brand as brilliant as these guys. Innovation in storytelling. So I've touched on this a little bit already, but we are actually at a really exciting time when it comes to communications in beauty. So, you know, truly game-changing innovation is rare. And what that means for us as communicators, sometimes you'd have this brilliant idea, but sometimes the product didn't stack up. And then that was really hard because you'd talk to everyone about it once and then they wouldn't come back because they tried the product and they didn't love it, which is really rare now. That doesn't happen as often because innovation across the board is pretty epic. But what it means for communications is that we can come up with really amazing ideas because brand and idea, it's no longer the brand outweighs the idea. It's that brand and idea have to be matched and sometimes idea first. So as communicators, it's essential to produce exciting and thoughtful ideas, new interpretations of beauty that are rooted in cultural conversations and higher purpose, work harder. I think this higher purpose and purpose as a constant stream of thought that we were always talking about, whether a brand has it or they're trying to find one. that kind of higher purpose, it works harder to connect brand with consumers and in this cluttered environment. And I think I've got a view here of the Show Us campaign, and Dove have always been, you know, head and shoulders from the self-esteem work that they did. You know, they from Real Beauty, which was that they had a great cream, but everybody knew that, you know, the firming cream was good because it was Dove. But equally, they needed to really explore their message, which is when the Real Beauty campaign came, and they've continued to do it. Absolutely fundamentally brilliant. And I think what has been really interesting to see with Dove as a client is that the product is often a souvenir of the idea. So it's not product first. You have this amazing campaign and concept. So Show Us was around, you know, it was a collaboration with Getty Images and Girl Gaze, which is a female collective of photographers that have got a really brilliant take on taking images of real women. And it was a collaboration that actually answering the tension, which was that when you go onto Getty and you look for a kind of real beauty, you've still got all of these really staid, fully made up, hyper retouched visuals. And now you can go on to Getty and download any one of these visuals for free and use the license. So in terms of the concept, which was Show Us, which was genuinely, you know, show us as we are natural and in our everyday life. And I think that what they did is, of course, you can't see one product visual there because the product is a souvenir and people are buying into the purpose of the brand over and above just a great moisturizer, which of course, absolutely they have. So in summary, I think elevating your product through innovative and thoughtful storytelling and dynamic ideas that are often collaborative are really essential now to great beauty communications that generate standout in 2021 and beyond. And I think that's super important because, you know, there is such a lot of product and there is such a consumer fatigue with knowing all of these various different things and which one is the right one, and that can be really hard to navigate. And therefore, if you come up with a really awesome concept from an idea point of view, whether that's a physical, a virtual, you know, a content series, it's the idea now that needs to be as compelling as the brand itself. And some of these ideas come from, we get some of our best ideas from the grads. You know, last week we had a brainstorm and we were talking about what we're going to wear when we finally can eat inside or outside and when it's not raining. And one of the girls was like, oh, it's always going to be about shopping the stash, and obviously not being that cool. I was like, okay, cool. What is that then? And, you know, it's about, she hasn't got any money. She's finding it really hard. She wants to save all her money up for that brunch. Actually, she's going to go back and look at all of the palettes that she hasn't used. She's going to look at the stash and she's going to shop the stash in a way because to come up with something new. And there are concepts like that you could see now as a complete campaign, like shop the stash as a campaign and encouraging people to go back to brilliant colours, brilliant product formats that have never been used to create a really inspiring look, and you can see how that would play out. But I think, you know, this idea and elevating ideas, we talk a lot about elevating ideas, so inspiring that they elevate perceptions of beauty. So body positivity was a really great example of this. So in 2018, Isle of Paradise, which is one of the clients that we look after, the tanning industry had hit kind of peak levels of body ideals, you know, a category exclusively reserved for kind of skinny beach babes, completely focused on image and dedicated to sharing highly retouched body visuals. You know, Isle of Paradise and Jules von Hepp, who is their incredible spokesperson, came out. He'd been speaking to people about the kind of confidence that being able to have a tan, how it makes you feel, why people haven't done it in the past. And they came up with this amazing campaign, which then led through to a partnership with Glamour and the opportunity to download this Get Body Posy guide, which was a free curriculum almost of how to support body positivity. So again, you know, no product visuals, but the concept of a tan and what that can do for you, and also how you can progress that mindset. But I think, again, product as a souvenir of the idea is absolutely fundamental to comms in 2021 and beyond. Be considered and hyper aware. So this is something that even as you progress in your career, or I find personally, you know, you think it's something that you really need to support the junior roles on, but actually it's everybody. It's all kind of conversations, because, you know, there are lots of conversations happening. And I think, 2020 really ushered in a new meaning for beauty and personal care. You saw people using it to support mental health. You saw people completely being reinvented in terms of who they wanted to be, what they wanted to stand for. There was a really interesting spike, and it was a trend that we coined new beginnings, which is that we saw people purchasing lashes and brow lamination kits and tan and things that perhaps you wouldn't try if you was going into the office 5 days a week, because if you got it wrong, it was not going to be a good look. So people were testing all of these new concepts, and actually you've seen people completely reinvent the way that they look and feel. Like maybe you'd never worn a red lipstick before, but you finally found peace with it in your own environment, and now you can kind of go out. So I think, beauty and personal care is used in a really different way. Definitely self-love as defiance. There was a brilliant Vogue quote around, preconceived ideas of beauty, and the fact that actually putting on lipstick now is an act of self-defiance. And the impact of Black Lives Matter movement and the conversations that have happened and continue to happen have really exposed important questions about inclusivity and representation in the industry. And I think what's really important about that is that, some days it's not the right day to pitch. Some days you shouldn't be pitching, and you need to be able to have that sensitivity and be able to guide the client on that counsel. So we talk about it as kind of having a sense of sensitivity, understanding what's going around you. So the kind of tried and trusted codes of, hi, how are you? The chances are, if someone's experiencing this kind of overarching kind of load, they're not that good. The chances are. So really thinking about, how can I communicate? Or is today the right day to communicate? Or actually, should I leave it a couple of days? And really thinking about the best way to engage that person, to get them to not feel that you don't understand them, don't understand their needs, don't understand their wants and desires. And I think that is so important for a modern day press office, to be really understood in terms of what are the right way to communicate with the people that you're asking to tell your stories. So in summary, the platforms where your stories are being told have people also experiencing what is being written about or shared. Lose the tried and trusted codes of conduct and think considerately about what is the right communication to have. And I think when I was writing this, I was like, is that really obvious and a bit basic? But actually, I don't think it does us any harm to think about, is today the right day to communicate with someone? Or does this feel a little bit kind of e-blast, one size fits all? Because today more than ever, to have a really solid press office function that is well respected, it needs to be hyper personalised and hyper aware. And then finally, consistency is compelling. So agility, responsiveness, the ability to pivot, all of these are really important traits of a successful communicator. And when we hit peak kind of lockdown, we spent probably 3 weeks talking to clients, talking to press around, how are you going to pivot your content? How are we going to pivot this brand idea? And actually, we did deliver some of our best work. We did our first ever above the line TV ad using UGC for Vaseline, that we turned around in 2 weeks. It was super cost effective. So in these moments of agility and responsiveness and pressure, sometimes your best work comes out, and we definitely saw that. And then we saw the team also really kind of switch on their innovative way to pitch and think about brands that perhaps had not been thought of before, especially for something like an Aromatherapy Associates, which is so rooted in, helping people reset and cope with daily life. And thinking about new and interesting ways to pitch a brand is absolutely, or a product is really critical. So, trend reports not every trend is going to be right. But if you think about all of the brilliant trend thought leaders, forecasters out there, we come up with a quarterly trends report every quarter, because we know that it's what then reignites, okay, cool, this is the trend that's happening. This is where I can see a reason for my product or my brand to be there. And it just, again, helps to tell great stories, create great content, and it's constantly evolving. And I think that's one of the most important things about comms, is that, it's evolutionary. It is always evolving. But one of the things that is absolutely key, whilst you're being agile, whilst you're being responsive, and whilst you're doing all these things that people see as really important factors of a positive comms department, is making sure that the root of the brand purpose and point of view always remains consistent and central to the idea. So again, you know, not every trend is right for every brand. And I think Fenty have done the most phenomenal job of ensuring that this mission that the brand was on when it launched and continues to be. So yes, their latest brilliant skincare content is ASMR inspired. It's all, you know, that's a trend for sure. Everyone's asking for it. Everybody wants it. It's really great to watch. And you find hours just staring at a screen watching the cream be pushed into the bottle or whatever. But I think what's always first and foremost is that the brand is always talking about representation and inclusivity, and it wouldn't join a conversation that it didn't think was right for that brand. And I think it was interesting when you looked at the volume of hand sanitizers that were created by brands at the beginning of the pandemic. You know, for Pi skincare, a brand, you know, they've got a British factory, they was able to switch it on, they've got goodness as the core of what they stand for and do, so it made a lot of sense. But then, you know, 6 months later, there were still brands coming out with a sanitizer. It felt too late, not agile enough. And I think sometimes, especially for clients that see a trend and want to be on it, as communicators and as professionals, it's your job to be able to also have that conversation, which is like, I understand why you want to have this conversation. However, this trend or this moment is not the right time to do it. However, if you look at what's coming down the line in 2 months' time, we think that we can really be on the front foot with this kind of trend. So being able to understand when it's right and when it's not, because that ultimately will either really support your credibility and your kind of authenticity as a brand and a voice and a spokesperson, or it could damage it. So really making sure that the root of the brand purpose and point of view always is front and center, and then the conversation or the trend that you join is secondary. So in summary to all of that, remember in all of the storytelling that you do, why your brand has an authoritative reason to believe, reason to be seen and heard. Not every conversation is for every brand and every product. So finally, in summary, I thought it would be helpful just to take a moment to look at the kind of 5 key takeouts that have come from mastering the art of beauty communications. So to be informed, we talked about the 5 C's. We understood that kind of really forensic understanding of consumer, brand, category is super important. So to truly communicate your message effectively, you must forensically understand what type of conversation you want to have, why, with who, be clear and informed, and have a very clear and informed brand and product point of view. Know that beauty is emotional. You know, people care so much. It's much less than fashion. You know, you can take off a jumper if you don't like it, but if you've got challenging skin, unfortunately you can't take it off. So how do you make sure that you really understand the nuances of your category and your product, and the role that it plays, and the emotionally charged conversations that are attached to your category? Be innovative with your ideas. So, you know, innovations at a level of brilliance, your ideas have to surpass that, and elevating your product through brilliant, purposeful, interesting ideas is absolutely key to any brilliant comms in 2021 and beyond. Show consideration and care. So, you know, where your stories are being told, we've got humans behind those stories that are writing them or that are creating the content for them. Be really respectful to those people and understand what they might be writing about and when's the right way to engage them or not, and the best way to engage them. And then consistency for the win. So remember, in all of your storytelling that you do, it's absolutely critical for brilliant communications to be agile, to be responsive, to be on the front foot, you know, all of the conversations, so that you can take a lead in categories. However, if it's not really rooted in your one brand narrative and your brand vision, it's probably not the right communication for you to be having, and not to lose that, because launch and leave, or attaching yourself to many different conversations, it's really confusing and doesn't allow for true penetration. So thank you so much. I hope it was helpful. So yeah.
Thank you, Jane. That was so helpful. And we've at Cosmetics Business, we worked with Scene for a number of years, so we know the great work that you've done. So thank you for that. It was a really wonderfully in depth, and I'm sure that many of our viewers will be inspired for their next communications campaign and know how to get started also with in the world of PR. We do have time for one question, which has come in from Victoria. So thank you, Victoria. She's asked, what are your tips for building organic talkability about a new skincare brand with key press and influencers?
Great question. So I think with press and influencers, if you're a brand new brand to market and you've not been in market before, then I think personalization is key. So if it's one SKU and it's for everyone, you need to be able to really hone the reason why and start seeding it to all of those people with, with the personalized message and the note and all of that, because it's definitely not like it used to be where, brands would only listen to the hard-hitting brand, the Lauders, the L'Oreals, etc. Press influencers, they're really excited by new brands to market on new skincare formats and products. However, if it's a range of products, then it's absolutely about really understanding what that journalist's skincare conversations have been. So is this someone that has had particularly challenging skin? Is this someone that has got a particular issue with the way that retinol is talked about? What are the kind of understanding that the profile of that journalist or influencer, and then being able to make sure that you respond to that with a really well articulated personal regime, product recommendation, and reason to believe for the brand, I think is really important.
Mm-hmm. So doing your research basically and getting to know the publications before you pitch to them.
Exactly that, and getting to know the journalist's skin, or have they just had a baby, therefore potentially hyperpigmentation or whatever those things might be. So really understanding both the journalist and the outlet and the reason for your brand to be there.
Cool. Obviously we're a B2B publication, so what do you think about that? For same question but for B2B?
Yeah, so for B2B, it's interesting because I actually think that it still requires the same premise, actually. And I worked at L'Oreal Professional for a little while. It was actually quite short-lived, but I worked and was doing the salon comms, and actually I spent a lot of time with the sales force explaining to them why this product was going to make that hairdresser's life easier, or that stylist's job slightly easier, and then also how it would then convert into sales from a salon to a consumer. Yep. So what are the things that they can be sharing with that consumer to know that it's not particularly, or that it's brilliant for them, and why they should buy into it. So I think again it is really about understanding. And one of the things that when I first started out in Lauder, it was always like, obviously read the magazines, know the pages, but it's always like, make sure that you know the last shoot as well, so that you can, pitching an idea that just was pitched last week obviously just looks like you've not been reading or caring about their content. So, hi, I'd love to shoot hair with you, and they've just done their hair issue. It's just obviously not a good look. And I learned that the hard way. But it stayed with me, and now I feel like people can learn from my mistakes.
Oh, fab. Well, thank you so much, Jonah. You've shared some wonderful insight, and thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.